As I mentioned earlier, Tower 1 is the heart of the project. It rises from the bedrock below the bathtub floor. In addition to being the tallest structure in America, it's considered obviously a primary terrorist target. The tower tapers and twists from a square base through 8 isosceles triangles. At the center part of the tower, these 8 isosceles triangles form a perfect octagon. Then it twists and tapers again to a square parapet at the top that's rotated 45 degrees from the base at the bottom. Now, this is designed that way to deflect wind, and in theory, this will deflect or withstand a 1,000-year hurricane event. Ken Grossman asked me to talk about the effects of Hurricane Sandy, and I will during the question and answer period later. A parapet will sit atop the 104th floor. The parapet is at the height of the original North Tower. The spire and broadcast tower above the parapet take the height of the overall structure to 1,776 feet, and there's a little bit of controversy about that we can talk about afterwards. The tower contains enough steel to build 13 Eiffel Towers and enough concrete to fill a string of cement mixers bumper to bumper stretching from Louisville to Chattanooga. The first 20 stories of the tower are essentially a bunker. The pedestal at the base of the tower has core walls 6 feet thick. The first 20 floors above grade are encased in both steel and concrete. To avoid the metaphor of a bunker, the exterior of the tower of the first 20 floors will be sheathed in a special prismed glass that are themselves another story. Between the pedestal and the spire, there's a heavily reinforced system of beams and columns forming another steel load-bearing tube. Compartmentalization this time is achieved by a floor system that more nearly approximates a highway bridge than it does a commercial building. The engineers and contractors in the room will appreciate this. I'm returning now to the slide of a typical commercial office floor. The actual floor system in the World Trade Center is like a bridge. It has things called shear studs and lots of extra protection in it. The wall at the core of the building at this point is encased in solid concrete rather than drywall. At their base, as I mentioned earlier, the core walls are 6 feet thick. Through at least half of the height of the building, the core walls are 4 feet thick, and at their narrowest point at the top of the building, the core walls are 2 feet thick. Now, the concrete in the structure is more typical of the mass concrete that you would find in a dam than anything ever seen before in a commercial building. The concrete in this building exceeds the strength of the concrete in the Hoover Dam. Clyde and Jimmy would probably tell you that the compressive strength of concrete from Home Depot is about 5,000 psi. The concrete in the Hoover Dam is 7,500 psi. The concrete in the World Trade Center Tower 1 is 14,000 psi, and it's loaded with steel reinforcement. If the tower is the project's heart, an expression of New York's oversized ego, then the memorial is an expression of its soul. No remains were found for approximately half of the victims of 9/11. There's nothing for the families of those victims to bury, no cemetery to visit. The memorial gives those families and the nation as a whole a permanent place to mourn. The memorial is comprised of 2 1-acre, 30-foot deep reflecting pools that mark the exact footprint of the World Trade Center towers. A small forest of 400 swamp oak trees landscape the memorial site. Approaching the site east to west through this grove is like walking down the aisles of a church. They're all lined up. Approaching in the other direction, north to south, is like walking through a random wooded grove. And let me digress to say, the last organic being to leave the World Trade Center alive was a survivor pear tree that a matter of months after the collapse, as they were clearing the site, they found a pear tree that had amazingly survived. They took it out to a nursery in Long Island, they nurtured it, it continued to grow. It survived one hurricane on Long Island. It's now back at the site. You can see new growth, it's symbolism for the city, and yes, it survived the last hurricane to go through as well. The pools themselves are surrounded by a waist-high parapet. It's symbolic of the parapets that surrounded the original towers, and the surface of the parapets is sheathed in bronze panels into which have been cut 2,983 names. The names are placed in a manner that allows people with connected lives to be together. The names of those people who worked together or who died together are placed together on the parapet walls. That placement is called meaningful adjacency. Like everyone else, when my family and I visited the memorial site, we reached out and we touched the bronze panels. We touched the names. You see people around the site touching the names, crying, putting roses in the names. These panels have to withstand the heat of the sun in the summer and the freezing temperatures in the winter. So the parapet walls have a heating system for the winter and a cooling system for the summer, so that every hand that touches those panels, and some of those hands will belong to family members of the victims, will always be welcome. In addition to the memorial and to the towers, New York is rebuilding essentially the entire transit system of Lower Manhattan. Spanish architect Santiago Calatrava was commissioned to create a new 21st century Grand Central Station. He's created two, one above grade called the Transit Hall and another below grade called the Path Hall. Path Hall is built of striking curved steel ribs, each 1 foot thick in steel. They support the roof of Path Hall and also the Memorial Plaza. Above grade, the Transit Hall is described as being open to the heavens so that the angels can come through to collect the souls of the victims. And if you'll notice the central arc, the central axis of the Transit Hall, that is the axis that's aligned to the memorial. And in this slide, you'll see this is called the Winged Dove of Peace. And when Hugh Schwab and our wives and I were in Russia this summer at the Hermitage Museum in St. Petersburg, they have a model of the Winged Dove of Peace by Calatrava on display there. All right, since this is a gathering of business people, all of this gives rise to a couple of practical questions. How much and who pays? And the answer to that is nobody knows. The project has been dominated by a constant stream of redesigns, political wrangling, and financial renegotiations. This has delayed the work and driven up the cost. On February 8th of 2012, the governors of New York and New Jersey released an audit report of the Port Authority, indicating that the Port Authority's exposure on the World Trade Center project had grown from $6 billion predicted at groundbreaking to $14.8 billion as of February of this year. The Port Authority's overall debt had risen from $9.1 billion to $19.5 billion in February of this year. The audit report concluded the Port Authority is a challenged and dysfunctional organization, suffering from a lack of consistent leadership, a siloed underlying bureaucracy, poorly coordinated capital planning processes, insufficient cost controls, and a lack of transparent and effective oversight of the WTC program that has obscured full awareness of billions of dollars of exposure. Meanwhile, back in the land of Genesis, the Burj Dubai Tower was opened on January 4th, 2011, to snag the title of the world's tallest building. At 828 meters, it is almost twice the height of Chicago's Sears, now Willis Tower. On August 15th, 2011, Saudi Arabia unveiled plans for Kingdom Tower, which is currently under construction, designed to reach more than 1 kilometer, 1,000 meters above the desert floor. By way of comparison, this will almost be twice the height of Freedom Tower. The main contractor building the Kingdom Tower is said to be the Bin Laden Construction Group. And in the waters surrounding the land of Genesis, the USS New York LPD-21 is on patrol. It carries a joint Navy-Marine Corps amphibious task force and all the hardware to go with it. The bow of the New York was built with 7.5 tons of steel salvaged from the World Trade Center site. The ship's motto is "Never Forget." Beneath the motto is the ship's seal, and I read now of the symbolism of the shield from the ship's commissioning ceremony. The dark blue and gold in the shield are the colors of the U.S. Navy, gold for excellence, blue for the sea. The crossed swords represent the Navy and Marine Corps personnel who will sail aboard the New York. The red in the shield represents sacrifice and valor, the white, purity of purpose. The gray chevron and 2 vertical bars that intersect the chevron represent steel. The steel in the ship's bow and the steel of the twin towers forever conjoined. The phoenix rising personifies the hope and determination of this nation to rebuild and regroup to fight terrorism. The shield on the phoenix's breast honors the members of the New York City Fire Department, the New York City Police Department, and the Port Authority Police who died on September 11th. The celeste alludes to coastal waters and the Port of New York. The red drops represent the bloodshed and the ultimate sacrifice made by the women and men who died on 9/11. The 3 battle stars were earned by the former battleship USS New York in World War II. The border of the shield is adapted from the New York State seal. The mountains and lakes surrounded by maple leaves represent the natural beauty of the state of New York. And the 7-pronged sunburst at the top of the shield represents the crown of the Statue of Liberty, the 7 seas, the 7 continents. They provide a direct connection to the littoral mission of the USS New York to fight terrorism anywhere in the world.